Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast, episode 84. I'm going to have an interesting discussion and conversation with my friend and fellow Southern California immigration lawyer, Nicholas Mireles. We actually became so caught up in the conversation that it almost went 2 full hours, and the battery on the recorder ran out. So there's going to be an abrupt end at the end of the conversation. This episode is also recorded in person, so you can find the video and previous episodes, practice pointers, and more information generally about the practice of law at the website immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. One thing I've done is to cut out helpful snippets from these longer interviews and take that info and make them into shorter practice pointers that you could access that are a few minutes that could help your practice in your cases. My last discussion with former consular officer Christopher Richardson had a lot of these little gems of guidance, which I edited out and put on the website, so you can watch that video in shorter format if you don't have the time to listen to the whole thing. Without further ado, let's get it started. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. Well, Nicholas, thank you so much for coming and talking with me today. Nicholas is a good friend of mine that's been practicing immigration law here in Los Angeles with me. He's also a guy who goes all over the place too. And we've always talked about immigration a lot, and we're so busy, we don't always have time to get together and talk. So I thought, instead of having our lunches or coffee breaks, let's just have a recorded interview.
Let's do it online, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone can take advantage of this knowledge, because Nicholas always shares with me a lot of experiences he has. He's pretty much gone everywhere and seen it all. He's a young guy, but has seen a lot of things. So I thought we'd just have an open-ended discussion about stuff. But to start, just your background. So where did you grow up and how did you get into immigration law?
Absolutely. Thank you, John. And it's a pleasure to be here. As you said, so much of what this world is about experiences and really learning by doing, not by simply saying, not by reading. So it's a pleasure to join you today. I'm born and raised here in Southern California. I went to UCLA for undergrad and Loyola Law School, where I graduated in 2012. I've been practicing about 6 years, primarily immigration, and I love it. It's one of these things where, as you know, John always kind of speaks to and does various, kind of video broadcasts about. It's never the same twice. Everything's changing all the time. And so I think as attorneys, this is really the wild, wild west of the law. Yeah. That what is one thing for today might change tomorrow, and a lot of the law is not like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you where you can look at something that says, oh, this is the same as it was 20 years ago. And so after graduating, I'd worked at small and boutique firms until I went on my own in the fall of 2017. So since that point, it's been, like you said, a roller coaster, because if people need help and they're living in New York, they're living in Washington State, they're living in the Midwest, generally speaking, my practice knows no boundaries. And what's beneficial about that is I think you really get to hone in on what the practice of immigration law is, and then in specific, with a specific attention to what happens in person on the ground, you really can kind of compare and contrast how the law is applied depending on where you are in the United States.
Definitely. I want to start with that actually, because you just came back from a trip going to Seattle, Las Vegas, different places. How is practicing in different field offices? Are they different in the way they adjudicate things, their inside rules of how they do things and that kind of stuff? What has your experience been?
So in my experience, and you're absolutely right, as of the date of this recording, I was in Seattle and then Las Vegas last week. Other than that, I mean, I've been in Omaha a few different times last year, New York City, and then there's of course an office in Long Island, which is nice and not close to New York City. But to your question, it's one of these things where a lot of what I believe applicants and my clients can really benefit from my experience is looking the part, sounding the part, and really doing your homework, because across the board, these offices are busy. Oftentimes you have officers that don't necessarily know everything. And so if your case even if it's run of the mill, you don't know what that officer's background's like. And so realistically, every office is different. Sometimes even just getting in the building. One thing that John and I were talking about earlier is that currently in Los Angeles at one of our, there's 2 field offices in Southern California. Even getting in the federal building where these offices are, it's taking about an hour, at least again as of the date of this recording. And that can be a real headache. That can really kind of add to that anxiety. And so, for example, last week, the Seattle office was close to the airport. The building, parking was abundant. Getting in the building was relatively straightforward. Little things like where you sit, the lobby, the people that you interact with when you're checking in, a lot of that can go to the anxiety. A lot of that can really kind of scare applicants, especially if you're pro se and not represented by attorney, or let's say you are represented by attorney, but they don't normally do this. And so it is region by region. And from what I'm experiencing, from my experiences, each region of the country, or let's say within its own district, because they oftentimes deal with the same type of cases, it's always beneficial to know if you're in Atlanta and you're at the field office there, well, they see a lot of X types of cases, whether it's this type of family member petitioning another family member, different parts of the world. And so that inside information as well can be very helpful to kind of understand what potential biases or expectations the officer may have.
Yeah, internally they have their own memos in each field office, how they deal with stuff, and so it varies. And a new director comes in and wants to do things in a certain way. Absolutely.
And to that point, John, you like myself are very much involved with the leadership here in Southern California, and we always tell them our job is to help them and do their job as far as the government. But all it takes, like any company, like any bureaucracy, is a new leader to come in and completely wipe away procedure A, and here is procedure B. And I think what our job is, at least those of us as attorneys that really want to do right by our clients and aren't just down it for, oh, you've paid our fees now, good luck. For those of us that really want to make it an experience that they'll remember, I think it's in everybody's best interest to know what those new procedures are. And actually, an anecdote that just came to mind, when I was in Las Vegas, there was a bunch of almost pre-interview warnings or pre-interview type reminders that had to say, if you don't understand a question, please ask. If there's any confusion, please ask. And I asked the officer, because I'm very upfront with the officers when I see something new, especially if I'm around the country. And they said, oh yeah, we started implementing this extra line of clarification.
Interesting.
And we joked probably because somebody said something they were not supposed to, and an attorney later tried to, came back with the argument that they didn't understand.
Yeah.
And now their field office director or some higher up said, okay, now you need to give these warnings. And that's very much, to your point, a local procedure that I now know when I go back to Las Vegas, that they're going to be really honing in on to make sure everybody knows what, criminalized vice means, or polygamy, or things that maybe an applicant might not be familiar with.
Yeah, that polygamy one is something I always make sure they know what it is, because I've had one guy just pause for like 10 minutes thinking about it. It kind of looks suspicious. He was from their list. And I'm like, officer, he just doesn't know what it means.
Yeah.
So he's like, what is it? And then the officer explained it, and he's like, okay. Now, they probably deal with that a lot. The officer should have known to better. Yeah,
absolutely. And it is funny because, as you know, being in this business as long as I have, your interview is the law through the eyes of the officer and that officer's experience. And sometimes they're, have a good personality about it, and you'll see this a lot locally now. You get a brand new officer, and they are by the book, because like anybody in a new job, you want to make sure you're doing it the way you're trained, and eventually you'll find your kind of style. But until then, you get 4.5 pages of inadmissibility questions that a majority of them you would never in a million years think about. Oh yeah, have I ever, the child soldier question, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever recruited a child under the age of 15 for the military?
We were a Nazi in 1945.
Oh yeah. Fortunately, and I'm sure you're the same way, fortunately I haven't got the Nazi question in a very long time. What's interesting is, given the current climate, probably should be asking these things, and maybe not so much related to the 1930s anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that comes up in our local field office with a lot of the older practitioners is they would like, and some of the, as you know what I'm talking about, people, they want to sit next to the clients. They think that helps the interview process. For me, I always like sitting behind the clients, in between them, and directly in front of the officer. So I'm staring at them. So if they're going to ask something bad, or if I need to jump in, they know I'm looking at them and stuff. And it develops a one-on-one between me and the officer and I. What is your opinion? Does it make a difference for you to sit behind them or next to him? What goes on in your head in those situations?
So you're absolutely right that this is something that we hear about constantly amongst our colleagues, those of us that have been practicing for decades longer than you and I. It definitely does seem a little bit of a feature of the old guard.
Yeah.
That I think for a long time that was standard and there was no problem, and then things changed. For me personally, my overall goal is to go into an interview thinking, I want the officer to realize I'm not here to try to run the show.
Yeah.
I want the officer to realize, whether it's in my actual speech or my body language, or potentially had we've worked together in the past and they remember how I go about my business. I want the officer not to be thinking, oh God, here's another attorney trying to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And they're going to try to tell me how to do my job. And as you know, John, and for everybody watching, these officers have complete discretion. True, the law may be on your side, and eventually you will get your case approved. But maybe they kick it down the line, and you don't see a decision for 6 to 12 months. Yeah. And info passes don't work. Calls to the 1-800 number don't work. Reaching out to local leadership doesn't work. And so, in my mind, stuff like where I sit's never been a big deal. Additionally, I find, to your point, is just strategically, I like being very much engaged with the officer, so that if there is a problematic part of the case, I want the officer to see that I know what's on the record, and that my clients, although they're not looking at me, they're going to speak to that. So sometimes I will have a playful nod, or my body language will be something where it's very open, because again, the last thing I want is an officer to think I'm not being straight up, right? And sitting next to the clients because of their concerns and anxiety, I think that makes sense. And I'm a big proponent of bedside manner as attorneys. I think a lot of us are not good making people feel better about themselves and better about their case. But I think you can exude just as much confidence even not sitting next to them without sacrificing the essentially kind of good rapport you may have with the officer, either whether you've been with them before or after. Because I think you would agree, all attorneys, just like all applicants and our clients, are being judged by the last person that was in the interview. And so if they had a bad experience with an attorney, guess what? They see me, just as it's human nature. So my job is to come in as specific to who I am as possible, and that is going to be prepared, professional, and very much kind of out of the way. And then I think that what that does is it brings their guards down, allows the client, the applicants to be able to go through the interview in a very efficient manner, because as you know, these officers have many things to do, many interviews that day. And then if there is an issue or there is something that I would like to clarify, I think I've built up enough goodwill to where I can speak, as opposed to if I think you have a little bit of friction early on, I think the officer say, counsel, nothing more from you. I'm sorry. If you say anything else, you're going to have to wait outside. And then you have to call for a supervisor, and then it escalates a lot quicker than you'd like.
Now, the adjudicator's field manual, I think, says the rule is you could sit next to them, but as long as you don't block the way for, if emergency happens to run away. But I agree with you. Last thing you want to do is get the officer defensive right off the bat. And you should have prepped the client for the most part well enough where you don't need to be next to them, because the officer's going to be like, oh, is the lawyer trying to get them some information or something? I'm sitting behind them, I'm relaxed, I'm kind of, sometimes I'll look down, I'll feign like I'm bored too, so it's like, okay, I know everything's good, I have nothing to worry about. And if I'm calm, the officer's like, oh, if the attorney's not worried about nothing, and then the clients are probably good too. If I'm ready to jump in there and defend, then like there's something to hide, and that comes into play.
On that note, I think in these times, because this is such a sensitive world we're now operating in, and the immigration is the hottest topic in American politics and world politics, people moving around the globe for reasons oftentimes outside of their control. I think sometimes attorneys go into it ready for a fight, and there's not going to be one. But now, like in any good relationship, if you go looking for a fight, you'll find one.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think it's important to be represented and have somebody with you that has your best interests in mind, and not the attorney's interest, not the attorney's ego, not oh, I hate this officer, so I'm gonna really rub it in their face.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, the best thing I can do for my clients on a day that there's an interview is try to walk out there with an approval in hand. Mm-hmm. And as you know, this is a very discretionary world. And so if these are the little things that you can get in their good graces, and the client's and the application's approvable, and in a marriage, let's say a marriage-based green card case, the bona fide documents are there, I find that is my ultimate goal. And I think for applicants, for people thinking about getting into this, filing for these types of applications, I think it makes everybody's life easier. Yeah. But as you've said, some of our colleagues, and I'm sure people all over the country, they take a different opinion on that. And that's the best part of what we do is, there's many ways to get this thing done. Yeah. I think the path of least resistance is something that you and I agree on.
It's a smoother way to do it. Some attorneys, there's this idea of like, I'm an aggressive attorney and this and that. And it's like, it's a misnomer people see from movies in Hollywood of a trial attorney being super aggressive.
Absolutely.
The less aggressive, it's like that one martial arts. You got to just play with energies and redirect it. That's the way to go.
I will use a baseball reference, John. Whether you can pick it up or not. It's great to throw 100 miles an hour, right? Yeah. But if you can throw a curveball and take off 15 miles an hour, but have a finesse to it, mm-hmm. and really kind of get it in, basically get a strike or do the job with more finesse and almost charisma, why not do that? Exactly. And then once you can't throw 100 miles an hour anymore, you've already developed this part of your game. Yeah. And I think you're very much right that that hyper-aggressive A-type personality, it's me or you, it's not both. I think there's a time and place for that, especially in immigration. Mm-hmm. But this is essentially potentially a victory lap for my client's case. Somebody who, when I was in Seattle last week for a client matter, it'd been seven years. And, having got approved shortly after, he felt like he had his life back. Yeah. And so I go into that always thinking, let me do everything I can, even if it's swallowing, my pride, biting my tongue, because I think that's what's best for the case.
Yeah, if I need to apologize and look dumb or something, like,
absolutely.
If the officer needs to chew me out just to prove it, then whatever, that's what I'm here for.
Absolutely. Sometimes these officers, I think they have a good time with asking your clients, the applicants, about something, and then say, oh, your attorney should have told you. Yeah. And it's this playful thing I think they do where they're trying to almost one-up us. Yeah. And I like that because I think it's like, all right, as long as we get approved, again, where I come from and the way I grew up, I'm fine with a little bit of that back and forth.
Yeah. Now, what do you do if you have the interview and then, a month goes by and you still don't have a notice? There were some notes you sent out from our local chapter meeting. I do a little different. I want to see what you've done in the past for success and when the case isn't just going anywhere. The first, 6 months, you might do a lawsuit or something, or a year, but within a month, what was the first thing you do?
So one of the things I now do is at the end of an interview, if it can't be approved and they continue it for whatever reason, I always ask, officer, should I wait the full 90 days? Do you need a whole 120 days? These are the days that are kind of provided to us by the field adjudication manual that they can just lean on and say, oh, give us the full days. And sometimes they'll say, oh, give me 2 weeks. I got this, that, the other thing, 30 days. Yeah. And so I try to do that early on. So I know I kind of have that inside knowledge that, okay, I'm not going to bother you for 60 days because that's what you said. Yeah. In the event they say, don't worry about it, I should probably have this by the end of the week, I say, great, and I make a note of it. And then if nothing happens then, at least locally, I'm always, I think about all of the triage we can do. Do I email a particular a member of the leadership in that office, or is it too early to do that? Yeah. Can we go through what's called the InfoPass system to try to follow up in that way? Generally speaking, I try to give enough time to where when I do follow up, I'm not going to be told, oh, you're following up too quickly. Yeah. But let's say, to slight variation on your question, let's say there is an issue on the case that I don't think is an issue, and I think it's actually just a misapplication of the law, then I will go to a supervisor kind of directly and try to plead my case very easily and very straightforward.
Is that on the same day or after? What?
I would say with that, I would say pretty quickly. Potentially the same day, potentially the next morning, knowing that immigration in general is busy, obviously, and leadership is extremely busy. the last thing I want to do is bombard them with simple questions or simple issues. So I would really hold on to this type of going up the chain of command for real egregious issues.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the way I play it out. I give a decent amount of time but I kind of got that already. If it's just, oh, we need to continue it and we're sitting on it and 3 months goes by, okay, maybe I'll try to do an info pass.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to go the traditional methods. And then once in a blue moon, if I'm at the office, because I'm there often for interviews, and I see, one of the section managers or one of somebody in leadership from that particular office, I'll ask them kind of right then and there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my style.
And one thing I do, if it's a case that should be approved, there's nothing at the 30-day mark, I calendar it, and I just send a simple letter politely, like, let me know if there's anything I can do to move it along. I didn't notice any issues, so let me know. Usually that loosens it up, and then the next couple of days I'll get the email notification from the website that it's been approved. And then at a 60-day mark, I may go to a section chief and then work my way off chain of command. That's in the district meeting emails they send. It wasn't the way they want to do it, but I've seen just a simple letter, as brief as possible. So they just say, "Hey, remember us? Could you move this along? We got to get our life together," kind of thing.
No,
that does it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you bring up a very good point. This is a world built on reputation, built on credibility. For both applicants, our clients, as well as us. I think that if you are known to be somebody that has a good reputation, that does good legal work, that tries to get everybody home in time, not really wasting people's time, I think you do have the inside scoop when it comes to dealing with some of these kind of hiccups or if things are jammed up a little bit. And that's why I think it's important that, I tell this to a lot of people, you pay for what you get in our business. And if you're after the least expensive price for, let's say, full scope representation, you just got to be careful, because I think you are going to get what you get, right? And I think for seasoned attorneys that have a good track record, that come highly recommended, I think there's a reason for that. And I think that part of that business practice, part of that law office culture, and I know your office has the same type, we really want to never be able to have somebody say something bad about us based on something we didn't do. If anything, I think we pride ourselves on doing our job to the best of our abilities, and then to the side, when it comes to the government, always dealing with them in the most professional and respectful way. Yeah. So that if they do get an email from you, and they're like, oh yeah, and they see, oh, he's emailed me a few times. Yeah. Oh, I remember that case. Oh, I remember this attorney. He looks like this. She looks like that. I think that sometimes is worth its weight in gold, because as you know, sometimes they just sit there and cases just grow mold and nothing happens, right?
And this is really important with our relationship with CBP here in Los Angeles, Southern California.
Very much so.
I've noticed CBP's leadership is actually pretty good here.
Very good,
I'm good, not pretty good. And so they've been really helpful in moving things along and stuff. And that personal relationship does a great job for that.
Well, and I think, even in these political times, I think those people on the ground, let's say CBP, for example, LAX saw more visitors last year internationally than they ever have in the history of the city. They are expanding the airport as they're expanding jets. So that means more people coming in on bigger carriers. And yet CBP and their infrastructure is losing people every month. And so they are so inundated with the task to protect our land borders, to screen all of the most heinous things that are out there, and I think they understand when we try to deal with either problematic cases or something that's flagged as problematic and is actually not. I think they see we're trying to help their workload. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right that we talk with colleagues from up and down the West Coast, the East Coast, the middle of the United States, and they don't have the type of rapport that we do. But that's a rapport that our colleagues that came before us have really built in, that our membership to the organizations we're a part of, organizations that were in leadership roles, we've really tried to pass that baton to say, there's definitely lawyers out there that are unscrupulous and they're going to just try to get whatever they can get. Yeah. But a majority of us want to do the right thing. And I think when you deal with something like CBP or deferred inspections, which is basically customs at the port of entry at the airport, but they have an office in downtown Los Angeles, I think they realize when you're coming in and you can clearly lay out what your concerns are or issues are, they're very much happy to kind of deal with that. Which is not the case across the country. Actually, something that just came to mind with the recent government shutdown at the end of last year, of the deferred inspection offices, basically offices that you could go and get things taken care of that weren't taken care of when you arrived in the United States. LA's deferred inspection was one of the only offices that were actually open.
Wow.
So they had people not only calling from around the United States, but people driving from different parts of California and outside of California, just to be able to correct something, just to basically fix something that was to no fault of their own, a mistake. And then, visitors or non-immigrant visa holders here, let's say for work or school, our local deferred action office deferred inspection office, was there trying to help people. And I think that's a testament to the type of character that we have locally.
Yeah. I feel, when the travel ban happened, people went to the airport, they were yelling at them and stuff like that. There is some nasty CBP things I've seen, but I could at least know locally. And people who contact me who have issues with CBP, majority of the time, they did something wrong. They come at the border and they say, what are you trying to do here? It's like, I'm going to find a job and then I'm going to stay and see what happens. Well, if you say something like that, obviously you're not
That's against the rules.
And they call angry, how dare they do this? It's like, well, that's the rules. They can't do anything about that. That's the rules, yeah. So I have a soft spot for at least the CBP I've dealt with in Los Angeles. I've seen some crazy things they've done other places, some wild stuff, but overall, I am sensitive to what they go through. Now, you talked about being membership organizations and stuff. Could you let us know what organizations you're a member of and how that's helped your practice and personally?
Absolutely. So there's a both nationally recognized organization that I'm a part of. I know John's a part of. It is the American Immigration Lawyers Association, referred to as AILA. And we have a local Southern California chapter. It's one of the biggest chapters in the world because, of course, in our business, these types of national chapters have members all over the world, given the breadth of immigration law. So that's one, AILA. The other one is the LA County Bar Association, referred to as LACBA, and they're very robust immigration section, which I also sit as an executive committee member. And so whether it's AILA or LACBA, as any Angelino practicing immigration law would tell you, they really are two separate organizations. However, we work kind of in tandem. It's probably because there's a lot of us. It's probably because LA County's got 10 million people, so more than, I think, over 40 states in the country. And so that type of robust network really allows for the exchange of ideas. And I think that's one of the greatest things about being a member. There's fees, there's costs, there's times when you think, oh man, when my dues are up, man, this is getting so expensive, especially for a solo practitioner who, have to always manage my costs. But the amount of personal interaction, the amount of assistance you can get on some nuanced issue you've never dealt with before, and lo and behold, you email our general listserv or you put something out on a message board, and all of a sudden someone says, hey John, totally, this was killing me 6 months ago. This was what I figured out for that particular issue. Feel free to email me if you have any other questions. And so as a member of AILA, and particular Southern California chapter, and then the LA County Bar's immigration section, it's really allowed for that type of, I think, networking and mentorship, as well as, I think, offering us a level of legitimacy, because if you find an attorney that's not a part of these big, robust networks, when it comes to having these type of associations and meeting people that aren't part of it, sometimes you wonder, is it really because it's that expensive, or do you not want to be held accountable by your peers?
Yeah.
Do you want to be the attorney that takes any case, charges a lot of money, and then doesn't do anything on it? And so as a member of these associations, amongst other local bar associations, I find it not only provides that network as well as mentorship, and also gives you a level of credibility. But I think when it comes to going back to the government, when we talk to the government, they know these entities. Yeah. They know if you drop these titles behind your name, and then if you're in leadership, I think that really gives them a sense of, okay, you're connected, you get it. As opposed to being some immigration attorney that also does real estate, criminal, family law, you're selling houses on the side. That type of general practitioner is just from the government side, they don't know what they're talking about. This is too nuanced and too ever-changing a field for someone to dip their toe in. This isn't reviewing contracts, right? This isn't making sure some arbitration agreement is subscribed to. This is the wild, wild west of the law.
I mean, again, with the travel ban, when it happened, a lot of lawyers, immigration lawyers and others, they rushed to the airport thinking they could do representation, not knowing there's no right to representation at the border. So it's a PR move for the news to see lawyers supporting it, but I think they really thought they could go there and provide legal defense that is not existing. Another thing about joining these groups, especially in leadership, is it forces you to learn because you have to go to the meetings. So you're going to pick up information that other people don't have. Plus, you have a network of people you could talk with and meet. And so if I don't know something, I know I could call. I mean, I email Nicholas all the time with all the nuanced stuff. And say, what do you think about this? So essentially, although I'm solo, I have this big practice of attorneys that I know on an individual level, and they're people who are dedicated to. It really, someone to spend the time to join an organization like AILA and go to all the meetings, this person cares, and they're learning all that. Because I see you at all the meetings with USI District 23 at CBP. So I know you're hearing the stuff I do. If I miss one meeting, I can call you, and I know you know the stuff and the people that need to do something. If I need something done, I could contact. So if someone, especially like if you're starting this stuff, one of the first things I did when I came solo is I joined AILA. I hadn't joined unfortunately beforehand, and I started going to all the meetings, and I got involved in leadership. And even now, I'm not in leadership positions at the local chapter. I act like I am. I go and I talk.
Hey, and
I'm always like
that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then on the national level, I'm with the law student committee, vice chair of that. National requires a different kind of work. It's not face to face as is on local, but it's good to do both levels. Do you have any plans to go do national stuff, or are you sit on local?
It's kind of one of those things where, like a lot of my life, I allow the universe to kind of show me those opportunities as they come. Sometimes you don't know you're right for something until somebody sends you that unsolicited email. Hey, have you ever thought about doing this, right? Yeah. Or you go to some conference, you're getting coffee with somebody, and they bring up a conversation they had with a third party, and it comes out that way. So always open, and I think that's what's so fortunate about our practice. Whether you're thinking about going on your own or just kind of watching this, just to kind of because you're subscribed to John's, kind of social media presence. One of the best things I think about going on your own is realizing, all right, now nobody's going to do this for me. Yeah. And to your point, as in your own anecdote, you jumped head first because you realized, okay, like if I'm going to figure out how to do this or make sure I'm not doing anything the wrong way, I need to see how other people do it. Mm-hmm. And so it's really, really a beneficial part of my practice. I think it really allows me to not only be a better attorney, but it allows me to manage my practice better. It allows me to understand what I want by seeing what other people do. Because the thing about being an attorney is you're always going to find someone that's doing more. No matter how much you do, you're always going to meet someone that does far less. Yeah. And so kind of like with wealth, kind of like with success, once you realize there's no right way to do it, by kind of looking at your contemporaries, I think it really can kind of give you that peace of mind that you're doing, that if you're happy and your bills are paid and you're taking care of your clients, what more do you really want, right? Yeah. One thing that I think is actually a pretty big distinction, and I know you and I talk about this all the time, really has to do with the generation. I think for us, the under 40 crowd, we were raised in a very collaborative environment. We were raised in a connected environment at a young age where being able to interact with people on a daily basis is very common to us. And those, the Generation Z, post-2000 babies, they even more so, right? They're even more connected with that idea that at any time you could talk to anybody, and whether that's to help or to hurt, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if generations in the past had that type of connectivity, and so I don't think they were raised in the same way. So why I bring that up is, to your point, I think we are so much more younger attorneys, or attorneys again that maybe were born after 1980. I think we're just so much more aware of the value of collaboration, as opposed to older attorneys where I think they were raised to be a little bit more lone wolves. I think they were raised to and develop their practice to say, this is how I do it, I don't worry about anybody else. Yeah. Even if somebody else is doing it in a much more efficient way, making overall work-life balance better, I think that's kind of something that is very distinct between generations.
And you see this particular point I'm about to make less in immigration practice, but you do see sometimes older attorneys more private with their information and not sharing. This whole point of this podcast is share information. I don't think I'm going to lose money or lose whatever from it, but there is that sense. And luckily in the immigration field, for the most part, it's a lot of openness. And people, get involved in immigration, kind of be a more open-minded person to accept a lot of the craziness and be able to deal with it. But that's one of the best parts about it. When I run into immigration lawyers that are privative and secretive and look at you as a competitor, it always throws me off even more than when I deal with general population, because I don't really expect that from immigration attorneys, to really hide stuff from each other.
Well, I think it's a testament to macro versus micro perspectives. If you think, oh, if I share X with you and I'm going to lose client Y, okay, well then that's your biggest fear, to lose a client. Okay, that's fine. But what's the flip side? You share with me, and I refer you clients, because we all can't deal with the amount of volume we see. Mm-hmm. But by limiting yourself, and to your point about hoarding what you have, I don't think people realize, well, then that means nobody's going to want to share with you.
Yeah.
And it is very, very interesting when you run into that type of attorney. And I don't necessarily see that as much in Southern California across the board.
Yeah.
I think it's a lifestyle. I think it's a culture thing here in SoCal. But when I run into it, I'm always just like, oh, this is the 21st century, man. Everything's free. Everything's online. Everything's being copied and made better. If you're still operating in that 20th century model where I have this practice in this field, in this niche, and nobody's around, and I'm gonna, make my living and live the life I want, there's 10 people that are taking your clients in ways you have no idea.
Yeah.
And again, I think to your point, it's kind of this people not being able to see the trees from the leaves. And I think it's really a disservice to them as an attorney, as somebody who's continually learning.
Yeah.
But maybe it's an insecurity thing, right? Maybe it's a pride thing, an ego thing. And to be honest, I'm sure that tells you, okay, I won't worry about necessarily connecting with you and wanting to get to know you and spend time with you and help you out. It's kind of like, all right, you do your thing, and I'll spend time with people that want to collaborate.
Yeah, especially for me, because I handle so few types of cases that I'm constantly just shedding cases. And when someone is like not open to me when I'm talking, and I have a huge social media presence and people contact me all the time, I say I can't help you. It's like, why would you not want to be friends with me? Because at the very least, do it for superficial reasons of getting money from me. Like, I don't like jobs, I'm getting clients from.
Absolutely. It's a funny aspect of a professional trade, right? Or a professional career that you have, and it really is. The law is very different than most professions. Specifically, the practice of immigration is very different. But it also deals with criminal issues, family law issues. You're dealing with business issues. You're dealing with trust and wills, estate issues.
It touches everything.
So to your point, why not be friendly, at least professionally or superficially, with someone that, if you're a trust and wills guy, and let's say you reach out to them because you had a question about a client, and they're like, oh, send them to me and I'll charge them for a consultation. It's like, all right, I just had a quick question. For that person not to realize the value of that relationship, again, some people aren't great at business. Mm-hmm. Some people don't realize or listen to very successful people say, give everything away. Yeah. Help people be successful. They will help you tenfold. And then I think you just realize, oh, some people didn't get the memo.
Yeah, and it's a popular, almost cliche now, but looking at it from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. And that's something I have to repeat myself. Sometimes there'll be months where it's low business, and I'll be like, oh no, like, should I lower my prices? Should I do this? And I'm like, you know what? Just stay on the path of what you're doing. Keep it open, be friendly, get the information out, to keep studying so you're a good attorney, and don't look at it as you're defensive or you're going to lose out. Look forward, be forward looking and push it, and it comes through. And something when you talk with other fields about referrals, what I've run into is this horrible perspective they have is, I don't need illegals. Illegals don't have any money. If a trust and wills guy's like, oh, what's this illegal alien going to do? It's like, immigration is much wider than that. Everything's not deportation, which is a public perception. Even people in deportation could have run businesses and stuff. It touches on everybody. There's this unfortunate perspective that's it's like, an illegal alien, if you will, with whatever that terminology means, is someone that's south of the border that snuck in or something like that. Even they have their own place and their own rights as human beings, but it's a huge system. I always tell people that are not immigration attorneys, you have a person directly in the immediate first degree of your life that had to go through the immigration process. There's no one in America who hasn't had their spouse or kid or cousin or their favorite employee, their boss, who has not gone through the immigration process. You just don't know about it because they don't talk about it. But everything is touched by immigration. It's like the Matrix almost. Once I got into it, because once I started doing like E2s and L1s a lot, and I started driving out Los Angeles, I was like, oh, that business is immigrant, that's owned by this foreign company. I realized the country is intermeshed internationally with immigration. There's no way to take it out. The problem is people are afraid to talk about it, especially the immigrants themselves, because of repercussions and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes they're ashamed. Sometimes they want to be proud Americans. They don't want to talk about their past. And it gets hidden, the reality that LA is one of the major markets. New York and LA are chunks of money. San Francisco, Miami, Seattle. There's just so much immigrant-related business and money where if you take that away, the whole country's going to collapse. And so, but because those people aren't outspoken, it doesn't get heard in the national debate, and they get hit out with these horrible kind of things that are said about them and about the process and everything. So that's something that, am I going to go out and educate these people? I just say, okay, you're a fool, you don't know any better, and it is what it is. But people who have understanding and are open-minded to listen here, they see the opportunity that's there. We have so many clients that need trust and will. So they divorces, there's this and that, and they come to me sometimes and say, oh, I don't need an immigration attorney. Immigrants don't use my services. Like, no, you probably more than 51% of your clients are immigrants. You don't even know it because you don't pay attention. But that's the nature of it.
It's an interesting concept, right? That at the heart of what America is an experiment for people to come from wherever they come from and whatever cultural or familial baggage or heritage they have and start new.
Yeah.
Right? It's still the only or one of the only countries where people don't see you for what you are without saying anything. They see you for what you've done. Right? It's an action first country. And so to your point, I have this conversation a lot when other attorneys ask me like, oh, is there money in that, right? It's a very classic attorney to attorney conversation. Or, oh, well, dear client, are you pro bono? How does that work? And I remind everybody, nobody comes to the United States and says, I'm not going to work. If anything, a majority of people, for the 270 plus years we've been a country, their sole goal is to work.
Yeah.
Their sole goal is to say, where I'm coming from, I cannot live a life. And specifically, I cannot earn anything to take care of myself or my family. There is this place, at least currently, that I can go and make my way. And I don't need any charity or any type of handout from anybody. I just want a shot to, run that business or operate in that world and to earn something for my labor.
Yeah.
And when people work, they make money, and if they need representation, if they need good legal work, of course they're going to spend for it. And so it's this, to your point, this very narrow-minded and really just ignorant mindset when it comes to immigration in the United States. And to your point, we don't talk about it, or those that are most affected don't want to talk about it, because there is a real fragility. There is a vulnerability about basically, you could be a 30-year green card holder. Yeah. And all it takes is one officer to say, oh, you had a DUI 25 years ago? All right, I think you need to see an immigration judge.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, your passport's taken, your green card's confiscated, and you have to wait for a hearing that won't come for a year. Mm-hmm. And that type of vulnerability is exactly why people want to become U.S. citizens, why they want to be intermingled in the United States, to not feel that everything that I've built and everything I've put towards making a life for myself, for my family, could be taken away because of my past, right? We're very much a forward-thinking country. Yeah. And so, to your point about you just decide not to have those conversations, the other thing you decide is that if somebody needs those services and they're ready to spend handsomely for it, you say, I know who I'm not referring you to, right? The other thing that I intermix a lot with other attorneys is employment law. Immigrants built this country. Wherever you're from or whoever you are, your family is probably not originally from here once upon a time. And the back of wealth in the United States is on immigrant labor. It's on cheap labor. It's on minimum wage. It's on the back of people who just want to be able to make a living. Mm-hmm. And those people are oftentimes taken advantage of. And so employment lawyers love talking to immigration attorneys. I have several that call me that I'm on retainer, because if they have some, big time labor lawsuit, somebody's didn't pay them according to the law, and now they have some massive 6, sometimes 7-figure settlement in their sights, they call me and say, oh my God, this person's terrified because they don't want to move forward because of their immigration status.
Yeah. It's a big problem.
And it's one of these things where the law, feel free to look up the labor codes. A majority of it, if not all, doesn't care about your immigration status because the work was done. And that's how not only it should be, but when people are ripped off after doing a job, even if they're unlawful, even if they don't necessarily have the documents to do that, well, the work's been done, the money from the employer's been made. how is it fair in anybody's mind that person shouldn't be rewarded accordingly?
Yeah.
And so it's a funny world that we live in, because to your point, there's so much bigotry and discrimination under the surface, and it really is a testament that the more outspoken people are, even if they are scared and vulnerable, the more that the people on the other side of the conversation are see, oh, wait a minute, you're right. You've seen stories the last few years about the beloved town, fill in the blank, cook, restaurant owner, coffee shop owner. Oh, he had some old deport order from 30 years ago, and now ICE is coming for him. And the community, who largely voted conservatively and anti-immigrant, is now up in arms. Like, wait a minute, no, wait, this guy? And it's a testament to your point. Like the Matrix, it's everywhere. Yeah. And so it's not a yes or no or like or don't like. It's, and this is a joke for immigration attorneys, it's a case-by-case analysis, right?
That's what I've seen a lot of time. People who are anti-immigrant, they'll have this person they love, and they don't even know they're immigrant until it comes up, and that really, I think their head explode, almost shifts everything. Oh, yeah. And another thing about being afraid to speak out, that one rapper in Atlanta, 21 something?
Savage
21. Yeah. He came out and talked. It seems like he had a U visa, so he had some sort of protection and stuff like that, or a U visa pending. And he spoke out, and then ICE came out and said a bunch of lies about him, about his background, and made it personal about him. It was really shocking that they went out and did something like that. But you speak out, you get hit with a hammer, even though he had a case pending and stuff like that. And so if you have a green card, you want to keep your head down, especially when you come from foreign countries that are dictatorships, which is most of the world essentially. When you speak up about a political subject, they're going to hit you in the head really hard. Oh, yeah. So it's not something you want to come and talk about. In my own family from Iran, my dad would hate it when I would make political statements. Now I'm like so grossed out by politics, I don't make political statements. Immigration is put aside as it is, but this program always about technical law and stuff, because it's like, who knows what's happening in politics. But you put yourself out there, it puts it in danger. It's a little easier for us when we're lawyers, so we have some sort of confidence. But even now, you get one lawsuit that's a bogus lawsuit, or the government coming after you, and they might do a tax audit or something. That's going to cost you a lot of money, time, stress, end up fighting with your wife and your family and stressed out. There's a lot of ways that you could be really stressed out if you do talk. So I understand where they're coming from. But part of America is knowing what the consequences are, and then sticking with what you believe in, and then moving it forward. That's just America. And that's why it's the best country in the world. Yeah.
And that's why we're able to be here as a child of immigrants. And as a child of immigrants, it's one of those things where at the heart of the American experience is people doing what they need to so that their children can have a better life. Yeah. Even if that means sacrificing their own well-being, or speaking up about something, or you have a good job but your employer's taking advantage of you and say, you know what, now I can't work. Okay, I'm scared to file this lawsuit, but I need to show my family, I need to show others that are similarly situated that if one of us doesn't stick up for ourselves, then they're going to keep doing that. Mm-hmm. And immigration's kind of ripe with those situations where, because of the vulnerability, think about the employment immigration space, right? So much of it is discretionary. So much is case by case. And what if you are somebody that says something and it comes out you're on an H-1B, comes out you're on an L, and all of a sudden, maybe the next time you're trying to renew it, maybe it's not as easy, right? Yeah. And without getting too political, we saw this with some colleagues who are LA-based attorneys that have this nonprofit in Tijuana that had been really big in the migrant crisis down there. They were retaliated in Mexico when they were down there visiting, with their families. And so it is an interesting concept to what it is to be an immigration attorney, what it is to run our own offices, and that even if we're trying to quote unquote stay out of it, because it's become so political across the board, you almost can't. And that goes back to the idea, well, take care of your clients, stay on the right side of the law, and if anybody ever challenges that, especially from an authority figure, then you can stand up tall and say to yourself, all right, I did everything that I was supposed to do, and I had duties to my clients to do, and whatever you're going to do, you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, and it inevitably goes into politics, especially it's been abused. Now, immigration shouldn't be political at all, in my opinion. Even though it's the number one, they did statistics, number one politically issue in people's mind. It should be non-politicized. There's so many more bigger issues.
Absolutely,
there's 1,000, and I'm not even exaggerating, bigger things that are affecting this country. But like with the situation where two of our colleagues went to the border, went to Mexico, and I think they were going on vacation. They weren't actually going to go activities in that one. And their passports flagged. It's not clear what it was. They were involved in a lawsuit with the government over things, and they were returned from Mexico. The use of criminalizing the free movement of a U.S. citizen, if that is the case, that they put a flag on their passport, that's really criminal and dangerous. That essentially is kind of a Stalin-esque kind of thing.
It goes against the Constitution. Right?
Yeah.
It goes against the idea that bedrock Bill of Rights, First Amendment protections, where it's free speech. They're trying to essentially help the most vulnerable, and all of a sudden you're in a foreign government, and that government doesn't know what happened. And again, a lot of this was insinuated. A lot of this from our colleagues that were affected. They didn't know. Other than their feeling and intuition and what they felt was happening. We don't know this for a fact, but it definitely seemed like our own government flagged them or asked to be flagged, and it really is it's a sobering idea to think as U.S. citizens, when you essentially challenge this administration, you challenge the powers that be, that there is these kind of grandiose consequences that supposedly the Constitution protects against.
Now they're good to do a FOIA request and get the lawsuits, see what happens. So hopefully we'll get a good answer to that. But taking it next level, there was a passport case of what was believed to be a U.S. citizen that went to join ISIS. While they're overseas, their passports revoked and say you're not a citizen. Are you familiar with the case?
Yeah.
So then, that becomes a client or an applicant that's, horrible. They went to join ISIS and they're supported terrorism, all that kind of stuff. But then as a lawyer and as an American, you can't look at the issue. You got to look at, the person overseas, their passport's canceled. They have no right to be able to challenge this cancellation. Now, if they're criminal and stuff, they come to criminal courts to deal with them here. That's what should happen. But it's very dangerous for them to just say, okay, you're not a citizen anymore, and cancel that, and you have no regress or way to fix the situation overseas. And that's really dangerous. Again, they're using the passport as a tool to control people, their movement and stuff. Now, they've been doing it where if you owe back taxes, if you owe child support, if you have if you been a child molester, you can't travel. Those are things that it's understandable, but it's a slippery slope from there. Then you start getting people that you don't like and stopping them. And that's why it's one of those things when it comes to, in my opinion, with the law. The law is the law. You don't look at the actor, you look at what the law is, and you got to deal with everyone the same and let them deal with court of law, give them access to that. But it's very dangerous to use this as a tool for political means, essentially, to hurt people.
You remember first year law school, you remember your criminal attorney talking about, or criminal professor, if we can't protect the worst of us, how do we expect to protect the best of us? Very similarly, the law doesn't protect the ISIS member who now wants to return home because they've made a grave mistake. And we're not even allowing them to come in to be put in authorities and then be criminally charged.
It's not like they're going to roam the streets. They're going to be maximum security immediately. So,
and if anything, it's one of those things where sometimes when people have this heavy hand because they think that's actually going to work, look at the war on drugs, right? Look at abstinence-only policies. Look at any time we've said black or white, yes or no. Life is not black and white. If anything, and lawyers know this more than anybody, life is in the gray. So it's a very interesting concept to think. And as lawyers, I think we live in this world of, facts and laws. That's what matters. Not who you are, what you support. The First Amendment's a perfect example of that. Just because you don't like the speech doesn't mean you have the right to control it, right? And you learn this in law school, you learn this as you're growing up. But when it starts to, then now you have to ask yourself, okay, where's the limit to that? So yeah, I think when it comes to, our practice, when it comes to our space, you're every day, and this is, I think what your practice is built on, there's something that you could be learning. There's something the system is being challenged by, and you can say, oh wow, I never thought about it that way. And that's what's so provocative and so enjoyable about doing what we do, is that it's not, you're not sitting in a cubicle, pushing paper from some big time law firm, making crazy money with a good title, but literally, trying not to fall asleep, or trying not to, hurt yourself because it's so mundane and boring and the same and the same and the same. If anything, sometimes I think we wish we would have the same day twice.
Yeah, make it easier for sure.
But that's, I think, what we do. There's a certain personality trait that you have to either have or develop. And I think it's these types of conversations, I think these types of problems and what ifs that really kind of stoke that interest and stoke that fire in us that says, the next day when you get that phone call of someone with a very interesting situation. You say, okay, I don't think I'm necessarily the best person to handle this, but let me see what I can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're looking for in a career. I think that's what you're looking for in a lifestyle, is that every day you're excited to get up because you don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So what are the plans for you with your growth and development? What direction are you going with?
So let's see. Like I said, I started in the fall of 2017. As of today, it's been about a year and a half. It's all been good. It's been, talk to my doctor. I'm healthier. My blood pressure's lower. It's one of those things where because I always took care of myself, because as I got older, I worked since I was 16. I largely put myself through school with the help of loans.
Are you fluent in Spanish?
I'm not. I have let's call it conversational at best. And even that, anybody that knows me would laugh at that.
So immigration lawyer doesn't have to speak more than English.
We can do 30 minutes on that. Absolutely not. I find that the greatest hindrance to people thinking about going into immigration as a law student or new attorney is the idea that you have to speak a language.
Yeah.
I think that like I said earlier, a city of 10 million people, let's just use LA County in general, a majority of those people speak English. All of them know someone that speaks English. And so if you are providing a level of service and can take care of somebody, language will be figured out. Yeah, I think language helps with that familiarity. I think there's certain things that just has to be, people have to speak to somebody in their language. But again, you know this as well as I. There are a lot of people out there that'll speak your language, that'll look like you, that'll be from where you're from, and they will rob you blind and do nothing for you.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it shouldn't be about how good looking somebody is. It should be about who they are inside. And similarly for an attorney, maybe I need an interpreter. Maybe I need to call one of my staff on the fly because I don't speak Korean and your family member would prefer that. But guess what? Once we're on the same wavelength and we're having that conversation, that becomes irrelevant. So I do not speak fluent Spanish, nor do I speak anything else. Like John, my wife is Persian American or Iranian American. I have the as you know, also the fleetingest, the most fleeting amount of Farsi under my belt, which is always beneficial when you're meeting somebody that speaks Farsi. But yeah, I don't have it. I actually don't think it's a big deal, and I think sometimes that people who do speak a language limit themselves to who they can represent, because in their mind, if I don't speak Mandarin, how am I going to have Mandarin clients? Yeah. So that's tangent one. Take it a step back, just to continue to grow the business. I mean, realistically, I find, to your point earlier, if you stay the course and don't worry about things coming in and things going out, and just do right by your business, do right by yourself, that work-life balance, I find that in the long term, you're going to be extremely successful. That if you lay the foundation of that house and you let it sit accordingly, even though your neighbor's house is going up a lot quicker, when they essentially have structural issues in a few years, and you don't, even though your house took longer to build, you're reminded yourself the tortoise wins every time against the hare, right? We know these parables, we know these stories where it's not about being first, it's about being the one that does it right. And so that's kind of my methodology with my business.
That's a very interesting thing you pointed out, because there are times when there's cases I could get, but I'm overwhelmed or it's too complicated for me. And there is an aspect of humanity where I don't want to lose out on this, and this. But you could get all these cases, get all this money, but it could collapse on itself. You do something wrong or get overwhelmed. Slow and steady, build it, and over time come better and better, and you have something really solid. And law is about reputation. That's the number one thing that gets people in the door. It's reputation and relationships. So that's a primary thing, not to overwhelm yourself just to do it and think you're losing out. That the fear of losing out could really hurt you when you're growing your practice. Now, because I know people who all of a sudden get overwhelmed, they get a bunch of cases, they make their firm really big, and they hire people. Quality goes down, and then things go slow. Then they have a bunch of overhead. So it's you got to be careful when you're doing this stuff. The first most important thing is the quality of service you give, because it's people's lives you're dealing with. You're a surgeon essentially. You're a surgeon in someone's American life. You're doing surgery on them in their life in America. And if you're not successful, then they're dead on the table.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head when it comes to overhead. It's not about how much money you make, it's how much money you spend, right? I mean, if you learn this growing up, if you have $10, you can spend that tomorrow, right? If you have $100, well, how quickly did you spend the 10, right? Yeah. And so I think it's a fundamental flaw in, let's say, the entrepreneur, the business person, or what have you, that, oh, no, I need to get a lot of business, and because that's the way I make a lot of money.
Yeah.
No. To your point, you need to create a culture and a system of customer service that gets people not only to hire you, but gets them to give your name out to everybody they've ever met whenever questions about, oh, do you know anybody that does immigration? And a lot of times it's the idea that, oh, I'm at a buffet and I'm so hungry.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just get all this food. The first thing I see, I'm gonna eat it up. And then you go back and you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's all this other better food.
Yeah.
But I'm too full to deal with it, and now I'm miserable, right?
Yeah.
That consciousness about going into it. And so let's say you're thinking about doing, you're going on your own or whether it's an immigration or not. I think that understanding quality over quantity is more important in this business than anything else. Because in the age of Skype, WhatsApp, WeWork, Regis, being able to talk to anybody anywhere in the world, you don't need a lot of the trappings that the 20th century required. You don't need the library with books in it so that people know you have a library of books. But people that subscribe to that method of building a business, or that idea, I find it very funny, because I think it's like, oh, okay, do you have a landline at your house too, right? Do you still, do the things our parents' generation did?
Yeah.
If you do, probably tough, because you're probably the only one.
Yeah.
And two, you probably create more stress than is required.
It's a shrinking pool of clients that would come to you. Because, like, for example, I know a lot of lawyers don't have websites or don't have any social media presence, or like they shy away from this stuff. And it's like, that's what's the generation coming up. They look at reviews, they look at this stuff. So even if you hate being on Yelp or something like that, that's where people are going to go look. So you don't really have a choice, no matter how being on Oliver or something like that. So
the last time I checked, parents are using Facebook. It's
Yeah.
the over 40 crowd, not the under 40 crowd on Facebook. And so it's one of those things too, where I think there's this idea that, oh, my client base doesn't come from social media. It's like, I don't really think you understand. Everybody's on social media. How do you think grandparents talk to their grandkids these days, right? It's not on the landline anymore.
I mean, they're going to put your name in Google and then see what comes up. And if it's my name where I have like a Facebook presence and the other person don't, they're going to feel like, okay, this person has nothing to hide. He's on Facebook.
And let me give him a call. Oh, there's several ways to reach this person.
Yeah.
Oh wait, this other person who has no presence, I have to call, and then the number's busy, and then eventually when I get through to a secretary who's kind of off-putting, we have to come in for an in-person consultation. By that time, I've already signed that person up, and we're already working on their case.
I've seen that the number one thing for closing a client is how fast you get, because clients are not going to want to call a couple of people. It's really annoying sitting through different consultations, going through your life history, going through the immigration process. Ideally, people would talk to 5 people. I always tell them you should get different opinions, because the way immigration is, you talk to 5 lawyers, you're going to get 5 different opinions. It's kind of crazy because of experience and the whole mess that is immigration law. But people don't have that patience. So if you're the first one to pick up and have a nice personality, you could close the deal much faster. And money is not a problem. I mean, there are people who call how much is it, but I've found in life, most people, if they like you, the money's not an issue. Then they'll deal with it. And if you're going to say something astronomical, crazy expense, even then I've had people come who had an attorney mess up their case, and they just sold it really well. And they were good salespeople that got the case, and they come to me. I'm amazed of if it's basic case that might be $2,000 or $3,000, they got like $15,000, and they messed it up. And it's like the guy had a good presence, he had a good video and this and that. But they'll pay you the money. That's never an issue. It's really about them trusting that you're going to do the work and you're going to have a relationship and you're not going to leave them out to dry. And you're going to hold their hand, because it's like having cancer when you have an immigration issue. Is the doctor going to heal me, or am I going to be dead and have to leave the country, leave my family, my loved ones, my property, all that kind of stuff? So really, I look at it as if I'm a medical doctor with a sick patient that I'm trying to heal, and it causes stress for me too, because they change the rule. The 90-day rule gets changed all of a sudden with the fam, and then I'm like, oh, what does that be the consequences? All of a sudden, they're F1 students are a priority now, or the prioritization of who gets the NTA changes. Student visas are different. The duration of status doesn't matter more. This stuff has like heavy consequences for my clients that stresses me out. As this person have an in absentia order I don't know about, there's no way I can find out. They don't have an A number. I have to do a FOIA. FOIA takes 8 months. So all this kind of stuff, it stresses me out. But I think sometimes my wife's like, stop stressing out. But I'm like, I don't know, this might be wrong. I've been thinking about it a lot. But I kind of feel like I have to stress because that stress causes me to care more and pay attention more. Or if I'm not stressing, I might miss something, but that may be a psychological mistake that I'm doing. I don't know, but I try to overthink it for the sake of protecting my clients.
Oh yeah. Well, you take the term advocate very, very seriously. You aren't just a somebody who's washing a car and you don't worry about the insides of the car, the sound it makes. You're like, no, I have a job, I'm just washing it, and then you go on. You take your ownership of your clients and take on those concerns. And if anything, to your point, maybe that works for you, and maybe there's a balance there. It's an interesting concept because I think the idea of closing or just really making sure it's a fit for your client or an applicant. I think about it always from the applicant side. I mean, we're a consumer 99% of the day. The person that sold us coffee this morning, the person that we go and go to our dry cleaning, the person that for childcare, what have you. You're constantly doing what our clients are doing in us, which is, can you do what I want at a price that works for me, or should I go to one of the 1,000 competitors that I can find on my phone right now? And so, when you go to look for a car, why don't they let you leave? Because they know if they can get you to sign up right then and there, it's over and done with.
Yeah.
And it's the psychology behind it all. And so I find sometimes my best clients or the clients that at first are going to give me the hardest time, it's when I let them walk away and say thank you, but unfortunately I don't think this is going to work on your terms.
Yeah.
They come back and say, you know what, you were right. Yeah. I'm sorry. And they went from being a difficult prospective client to one of my favorite clients. Yeah. And they were just so caught up in that cancer that you analogize to, that they lost themselves a little bit, and just making sure that I wasn't going to rob them, or that I wasn't going to be the shady attorney.
That said, like letting them go, because there's so many lawyers that would be a salesman, try to close the deal really hard, a hard sale. I'm like, you know what? If it doesn't work, I understand, appreciate that, respect it. I do wish you the best of luck. And they say, oh, this person's not just trying to take my money. Like, you just let it go. And it really changed their perspective because they've dealt with people like that. And they come in with that worry. Is this going to be a real person or a con man?
I use the same tactic, and I recommend the same tactic in the dating world. It's how I got my wife. If you are thirsty, if you are overly aggressive, and you say, no, this has to happen, the age of that salesperson, I think, is dying. I think you and I both know that as soon as somebody's that aggressive with us, it says, sign up today, here's a retainer, it's kind of like, you're a little bit too pushy for my taste, 1, and 2, in the age of competition and access because of the internet. Give me a day.
Yeah.
And I find, to your point, when somebody says take my money, I want to hire you, and you're reluctant to do that for whatever reason, I think that ultimately goes to the strength of what could be a good relationship. Or, and I'm sure you've had this, somebody that you say, unfortunately I can't help you, but thank you so much, and gave them the respect and the time of day at that point in time, they end up referring you great clients.
Yeah.
Because they realize that even in almost a breakup, if you will, that you are a professional.
Yeah.
When, as you know, a lot of times that's when attorneys get their ugliest, is when things don't work out. And now you're getting negative emails and threatening suing people and putting liens on stuff. And it's one of those things where, you said it earlier, our reputation is the greatest thing that we have. And if you're trying to build a 50-year career, because fortunately that's what the law provides, well then why worry about this one person?
Yeah. I have a Nats case with a gentleman came in, a Greek gentleman, for naturalization, and he wasn't happy with the fee, so he's like, you know what, I won't do it and stuff. That guy's been referring me a case every 6 months for the last 3 years. Even though I didn't take his case, even though my price was higher than he wanted to, he's like, I know you're good. So that's just the way it is. The hard sale, I even tell people, sometimes we'll go into the meeting and I'm 20 minutes into it, I need to get more efficient. They're like, no, let's just close, I want to pay you, I know you're good. I said, no, listen, go home, sleep on it, talk with your spouse, go talk with some other people, this is complex stuff, and get a good feeling, and then come back. And then that really just shows that I'm not trying to hound people over money. I'll take a hit, 1 month not making as much as I want to or whatever.
Yeah.
But I have a relationship, because it's the foundation you're talking about, the slow and steady, and that's really important when you're a career like law is. That's long term. I don't believe bots and robots are going to take law away or affect us in really any meaningful way. this is such a personal experience that no robot could do it. Because when you have to talk to people, get information out of them, emotional kind of stuff, private stuff people don't want to think about, some people don't feel like thinking about, a robot's not going to do that. You need a person that has a relationship that could get that info out. And so we have that job guarantee. The only thing that can harm us is ourselves by like hurting our relationship with clients and how we present ourselves and how backwards we are in our public persona and marketing and stuff like that.
Well, and going to, again, I revert back to a lot of the themes we've been talking about to bring up new points. If you have a lot of overhead, you've got a big staff, you have the books, you have a nice car, well, yeah, you're going to have to take those cases today, even if you didn't want to.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing that I think, whether you're an attorney or somebody looking to hire an attorney, look around. If you're in a expensive part of town and they have an expensive looking office, chances are that means your price is going to be expensive. It doesn't necessarily mean the quality is going to be there. Yeah. Just how I know wonderful attorneys that you and I know that bring people back to life. And they work out of a shoebox in a whatever part of town and drive whatever. But that is the beauty of the law, is that it has nothing to do with the trappings. It has everything to do with the substance of that person. Yeah. And it's really a testimony to when you're authentically you and you figure out what you want and now you're trying to sell what you can provide to somebody. If you do it slow and steady, if you build it long term, as opposed to, oh man, I need to make X this month because I want to go on this trip and I want to buy that and this bill's due. Well, guess what? That quality is going to start to be affected. And as soon as that quality is affected, that goes to the reputation, that goes to your health, how you feel about yourself. Because make no mistake, to become an attorney, the bar just passed, right? It was the end of February, it just passed. Every twice a year, every attorney will see that date or they'll hear about it and they're like, oh man, we've come a long way from being able to finally practice, only to realize the new mountain ahead of you is bigger than the last two, with law school and the bar being something you just conquered. Yeah,
you think like studying would end after law school, but it just begins.
And now it's not just for a grade. Now it's not just for the idea that you can kind of proceed. Now it's like, no. If you do something wrong, maybe you cost somebody their ability to remain in the United States. You cost them their business. You cost them their relationships because now they're focused on all of this. Yeah, it's robots will take over what we do as soon as robots can start taking care of cancer, right? Yeah. Until then, though, you're going to need a human being with a steady hand and 30 years of experience of how to deal with that particular issue. And so it is interesting life philosophy where the less you do and the more consistent you are, the better you'll be. When in fact, I think especially in this Twitch impatient generation where we're kind of in now because of technology, because of how quick everything is, and instant gratification, I think that slow and steady mantra is harder and harder to develop because what's slow and steady anymore? No, if I can't download it in the 30 seconds that I'm used to, I won't do it, right? Yeah. When in fact, like, there's more technology in our phones than there was in, right, the spaceship that went to the moon, right? And yet we're complaining because Netflix is slow. But that's the mentality that you have to be aware of with yourself and then realize how that comes through you and how you display that as far as an owner and operator of your own office.
It's really looking psychologically, personally at yourself in the mirror and becoming proper in yourself, and then you can live the career and then the life that
absolutely. It's counterintuitive, but if you really want to make money and build a practice and be a somebody, the last thing you should be worried about is getting people on the phone. The last thing you should worry about is signing up everybody that walks in the door. What you should be worried about is what's in my life that stresses me out. What's in my life that I'm unhappy with. Let me make sure I can tame those to the best of my abilities so that when the work does come, I can give high caliber, consistent representation across the board. Yeah. Because make no mistake, your immigration clients will be your clients for the rest of your life and their life. You will be their family's clients. You will be their colleagues' clients. You will be their employers' clients. And so I'm sure you have cases right now that you could think about that the first 6 months on the job, you still have a relationship with those people. And it's a testament to this isn't a one and done. This is very much you're ingrained in people's history. You're ingrained in their story. And because it's such an intimate part of their life, you will always be, John the attorney. Oh, he's a Persian guy from LA. That's my great guy. You will get boxes of chocolates and thank you letters throughout the year. And for you and me, and I tell this to my clients regularly, to me, your case is my Tuesday 9 a.m. To you, this is everything. I have to remember that when I'm thinking about the magnitude of what our work does, even though to you and I or to our colleagues, oh yeah, in and out, straightforward, one step this.
Some naturalization cases can happen. Clients freaking out. That's have to be conscious of, like, for me, it's just going to N400 NATS interview. It's not a big deal, but to them,
they've been a resident 30 years. They had that, one possession issue from 25 years ago, and they were young and stupid. They're embarrassed about it. Their kids don't know about it, and you are now about to talk about it so they can get their naturalization. And when it goes off without a hitch, and they're approved, and they're at that oath ceremony, I mean, this is a movie, right? This is the culmination of a lifetime of anxiety. One thing that's so common in our business is that somebody calling you saying, "You sure I can do this thing? You sure I can travel? You sure I can work? You sure I can do this thing?" Because they've lived their lives for so long without those abilities. Yeah. And they're terrified that you said yes, and then they finally do the thing they haven't done, and something bad's gonna happen. And you say, no, the documents you have, the status you've just been given, the non-immigrant visa you have now, that allows you to do that. So good luck. Call me when you get back. Yeah. I just had an email. It's one of those tear jerkers that you share with your partner or your spouse. I had a client who, let's see, without getting in the weeds, his brother petitioned him, preference category 4 from Mexico. This was 1996. Okay. For those of you that don't practice immigration law, there's a line for a lot of different type of family-based petitions. This is one of the longest from a country with the longest line. He had essentially been living and working in the United States for the better part of 30 years and was just waiting that time. His partner, same-sex couple, they were not married, but they might as well have been. They've had to forego any and all family trips abroad for decades now. Long story short, he's finally, visa bulletin becomes current. He gets interviewed. He ultimately gets his status, his resident card through his brother. I get an email after their first trip, together to see his family down in Guadalajara. Photos. He gets to meet the godson that he's never met, and the kid's 6 now, and my client remembers what it was like for that child to be born. Really being able to go somewhere you haven't been in 30 years because of life, and getting that, not the particular client it was that person's life, it was the partner. Who sometimes it's our spouses that feel for us, right? The people that love us feel for us more when we're in something, because when we're in it, we don't worry about ourselves, right? And you get those emails, and you get those kind of, thank you so much for changing our lives. Thank you so much for your work. And that case, it was on the books for a long time. Yeah. You get those emails and calls. Hey, any updates? Any updates? And when you finally break through, and they finally board that plane, and they finally come back in, it really is a testament to. For you and me, it was my 9:30 Tuesday. But for them, it is the end of not just the chapter, but potentially that part of their life, that book. Now they're starting a new book. And it really is a testament to when you do right by your clients and you look after them like you're in that situation, you will make enough money to live the life you want, and you realize, like you said earlier, money almost becomes irrelevant. Yeah. Because you know that when you start worrying about it, that's when you get in trouble. And when you stop worrying about it, it starts flowing in. And you're telling people, whoa, slow down. I can't represent everybody.
I have to draw a line on one part and look at your opinion is, we practice primarily benefits-based stuff, which has a much higher success rate. I mean, inevitably, most of the cases are going to be successful. But for people that do removal kind of defense, I've seen it where to them it just becomes a 2 o'clock, 9:30, and they're just whatever, just go through the motions, file it, get it out. I should probably get their perspective, talk to them directly, but one of the reasons I don't do that kind of work, because with my level of emotionalness and sensitivity, that'll just run me over like a train if I'm dealing with asylum cases that are crazy kind of fact scenarios, or people that are removal who are heartbreaking kind of cases. The family's going to be separated, the family's going to go broke because the father's not there anymore, or the mother. What do you think? Is it possible to do that kind of high volume work that has such a low success rate, and just keep your sanity if you don't kind of burn out or keep a distance from getting emotionally involved?
So my practice, I pick and choose my removal work, or let's be honest, I pick and choose the loser cases, because make no mistake about it, to be a removal defense attorney, you are a civil defense attorney, meaning by the time you're hired, you're already lost. It's just about mitigating the damages, right? It's about mitigating the costs. And so I think for attorneys who've had a business primarily high volume removal defense, I do think they can get jaded. I do think they can come up with a system that works, and maybe some win, a majority of them don't. But they're up front to say this is more or less buying you time until ultimately you're going to have to be separated, right? And so I think it really is a different business model. And I also think it's a different approach where I know plenty of attorneys, you and I both do, that very much have that vicarious trauma, that they go to bat for every one of their clients. They give them extended payment plans. They're giving them personal loans. I know plenty of attorneys that have done that because their lives are just so chaotic. And when you get that loss, and when you're denied again, and you go up the chain of command, you're going to the appeals, you're going to the Ninth Circuit, potentially the Supreme Court, and each time it's getting denied, I do think there is a weight that eventually we will break from. And so I think every attorney has to figure out where that line is. But that said, if I'm going into that type of work, or if I'm taking on those types of cases, I think the crucial part of the relationship, especially in the beginning, is I don't think we can do anything here. Yeah. I think the cancer is malignant, and I think eventually it's not about if but when. However, but what I do think I can do is make that win much longer.
Yeah.
Right? And one thing that I find actually very interesting when it comes to immigration law in the grand scheme of things, and as it relates to other parts of the law, is sometimes people have very good employment claims against an employer where they maybe can get a 6 or 7 figure settlement. Obviously the attorney fees comes in, etc., but they're going to get a chunk of coin. I usually refer to it as like a pension they never had. Then now that maybe they can, for lack of a better term, bankroll an immigration case that maybe is a losing case, but because of the way the system works, you're able to continue to appeal. And because the nature of the appeals, as long as it's not frivolous, as long as there's good grounds for it, and it's really more of the government applying the law in one way and you arguing another, which is perfectly within the law, then maybe you can get 10 more years. Maybe, because of something you did in your past, because of something you said or provided that wasn't yours, maybe there's really no way of coming back from that. And so I think if I was that attorney that has that type of practice, not only do I have to be upfront very early, but I also have to remind myself, and this is probably something I would say to you, like a doctor, your job is not to feel for them. Your job is to take that cancer out. Our job is not to take on their stress and take on that emotional scarring from the terrible things they've experienced. And you and I both have had many clients that have experienced the worst parts of humanity, but they're thriving. They're living their best life. I oftentimes tell people who ask me, how do you deal with a lot of these very heavy ideas and themes and the vicarious trauma that a lot of us have? I say, the thing that I always remind myself is my job is to help them, but not in a way that I think they can't help themselves. Because by the time they've come to us, they've already survived the worst things. By the time as somebody comes to us who's been the victim of domestic violence or has fled somewhere where they were, the victim of unspeakable acts, and they're still able to smile. They're still able to get up in the morning. They're still able to live. It's a testament to, I think, the human spirit. And so sometimes in that world, or when I take a case on, or I'm helping another attorney with a case, I have to remind myself of that, because that burnout is real. And to be honest, I think that's very much part of the analysis of, if you're an attorney thinking about taking on these types of cases or building your your practice on high volume deport cases, be aware that there's going to be a lot of crying spouses, a lot of crying children. There's going to be, I know plenty of colleagues who, have to bring up a 16-year-old U.S. citizen child who's crying on the stand because they have to talk about how if their father's not there, their hopes of going to college, that, soccer scholarship, playing bat, like they can't understand what their life's going to be like. And your job is to ask those questions in that moment to try to convince, let's say, a judge or government attorney, this is not a run-of-the-mill case. This is a case that's worthy of that discretion to allow someone to remain.
Now, when it comes to the immigration laws, there's talk about reform and stuff. Who knows if that's ever going to happen? But what are like 1 or 2 things that have come up in your practice a lot that you wish there be reform on, just to make things more reasonable?
So I think that every Republican, conservative, anti-immigrant person in Congress or leadership, anybody in power, the easiest thing they can do is protect DACA kids, finite amount, right? We know that number probably to the decimal.
Yeah.
And TPS. I think that the easiest things we can do are protect people that have been here long term, who've been essentially their criminal backgrounds reviewed every year, every 2 years, regularly, and give them actual status.
So TPS people would have a path to citizenship?
At a minimum, I think, I had an interview recently where a spouse was petitioning another spouse. That spouse, I think he was in his 40s. He came in 1990 from Central America, El Salvador, maybe Guatemala. He's had TPS, John, since 1991.
Yeah.
He's basically...
Yeah, that Guatemala, those countries, TPS, was like, it's kind of crazy to be there that long.
And so think about it. So temporary protective status is what we're talking about. Think about it as asylum, but every year or 2 years you have to renew it. Every time you renew it, you have to pay a new fee. You have to get your fingerprints done. They are the most scrutinized population that are stuck in this in-between second-class citizenship. And not only are they thriving as business owners, not only are they providing stability for their family so that their kids can have a better life that they have, but they're doing it in a way that's watched and critiqued and criticized. And so I think, as far as comprehensive immigration reform, I think reach across the aisle what the bad faith conservatives who essentially have gone nuclear for 20 years now. I think the easiest thing we can do is protect the 800,000 DACA holders and allow them to file for their residency without the need of a spouse, without the need of advanced parole, without the need of having to go to Ciudad Juarez. And then when it comes to TPS, for these long-term, we have cutoffs. If you've been here since X year, if you've been in it, if you've never...
They've had kids here, they raise families here, all of a sudden, where are they going to go with that kid? Because I have clients from El Salvador. You have like a 12-year-old kid that's born here, raised here, and it's like, wait, you're sitting back in El Salvador now? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Again, and we call it comprehensive, right? Because that's what it's about. It is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not that's going to incentivize A, B, and C. No. We are talking about a very clear approach to helping people who've quote-unquote waited in line, or people that have done everything in their power to be on the right side of the law. And, the data is very clear. Immigrants, the undocumented, commit crimes far less than native-born U.S. citizens. They live a life far more carefully because they know they don't have the safety net that is a U.S. citizenship. Yeah. The worst thing that you and I can do as native-born U.S. citizens is go to jail for the rest of life. I guess maybe be put to death. But we'd never be forced to go to where our family's from, right? It's a testament to, if the goal of, let's say, this administration, or let's hopefully say the next administration, is to show our generation, the under 40 crowd, the millennial generation, the one that's bigger than the baby boomers. We are by far the biggest generation as far as age group. All we're looking for is something that is fair. And that's that, again, comprehensive immigration force. Something that says, you know what? Because of these reasons, that makes sense to me. And if you get people to be able to finally exhale, all that means is it's better for the economy. All that means is better for public safety. All that means is we are rewarding those of us who, to no fault of their own, were born elsewhere. Came to the United States once upon a time, at a time when it was very easy to come to the United States, right? IRA, 10-year, 3-year bar didn't happen until after 1997, right? A majority of you and I, we grew up in that period. So when the government had moved the goalposts, if you will, now we want to be anti-immigrant and hard on people who don't wait in line, etc., we're forgetting immigration history and we're not looking at things in context. And I think that's a real disservice. So as far as those two things, I think it would be very, very easy, not even getting into some of the employment, atrocities that we're dealing with every day, as far as we're literally bleeding the best and brightest that come to our U.S. institutions, that are going to be the next Bill Gates, are going to be the next, leaders and innovators, and we're losing them to other countries that say, we want the smartest people in the world. We want people, even if you are from a country like India or China, where there's such a massive influx of those very educated, very business-minded people. That's the other side of things, that with very, very simple fixes, we can make the United States a better, stronger place, as opposed to a place where you're from dictates your opportunities.
I did an interview with a Canadian attorney I'm going to post, and just going through their system and the point system. I'm like, if you're, entrepreneur, a successful person, educated person, in 2019, that is now, don't know if I would come to America and deal with the immigration issue here. Even though it's an immigration lawyer's business for me, I'm like, Canada makes more sense. America's just America, it's social opportunity, but to go through this unknown system where you pay a bunch of money, you don't know what's going to happen, the consular officer could just all of a sudden say, yeah, I think there's misrep, and what are you going to do, consular liability? Why go through that? I would probably go to Canada if I was a foreigner and educated person with money. I don't know if I would come to America. Even though the opportunity's there, the headache and red tape of it makes it it's incredibly difficult, a hard decision to make.
We have these ebbs and flows the last 100 years in U.S. immigration policy, and through every ebb and flow, good and bad time, we always go back to the time when we closed our borders and bad things happen. Just how the times when we open borders and good things happen. Again, it's politicized, not because there's good arguments on both sides. It's because one side is losing. And so, as is the case when you're losing in a basketball game, maybe the best thing you do is pick up your ball and go home. Mm-hmm. The game is still unfinished and people are still there wanting to play, but for your own ego and your own legacy, for a lot of these parties in Congress and people in leadership, it's more important for them to stick to their guns, even if it's a losing battle. And so it really is, you have to think long and hard of, if, like you said, you are a young, bright, inspiring person that happens to not be able to do what you want to do where you're from, I think you are absolutely correct. That not just Canada, but parts of Western Europe, parts of Central and South America. And given that we are the nomad generation where we're not having kids, we're hardly getting married, we can't afford property, and realize that property weighs you down, you're absolutely right. Why, the United States just becomes just another place to build an identity and to have this life and make a life worth living. Mm-hmm. And maybe we will come back to being that destination. But right now, I think you're fooling yourself if you don't think there are other potentially better places to grow up or to start a business or start a family.
I have a case. The U.S. petitioner is this uber successful genius kind of guy. Speaks like 20 languages. Okay, exaggerate, 10 languages. Literally 10 languages, and has like all these businesses, very successful. Pretty much, flying around country. Fell in love with the Iranian woman and wanted to get her in. And travel ban happened, and he's like, you know what? Like, we'll just go live in Canada or Europe. I have houses everywhere. It doesn't matter to me. But he's going to start businesses there instead of here. He could buy citizenship anywhere. He get a Canadian citizenship like this because his background, start a business, whatever. And so it's like, wow, like this a thing like a travel ban. His wife, very educated person too. Like it's deducting employment in the U.S. and it's really, I think, just one of those racist kind of things of where it's not based in logic. It's just sort of like, in the old times when the Klan, white people hated black people, and it's like, dude, why? It doesn't even make sense to have this vitriol that's so, if some black person hits you in the, it's kind of like, you got attacked by somebody and you have that in your head, that's one thing, but like some people just are born, they have no problem with, nothing ever happened bad from that group, but they just hate him, there's no logic to it, it's just a psychological response, and I feel like the travel ban, a lot of these immigration issues is like that. Or gay marriage is, I think it's a hot topic political issue, but the gay marriage became legal, how many years ago? I don't know. 2013.
Yeah.
Had no effect on anything. It had it's okay.
If anything, probably a net positive because you had people being able to live their lives in the same way you and I as two straight cisgender men. And they got to not worry about that as much and got to focus on growing a business, making money for their employer, traveling the world, spending that money. You're absolutely right to think that as attorneys, we're so logical. And when we see people who act emotionally and not in logic, it's literally like watching them try to solve a math problem in a language they don't understand. Yeah. It's almost just like, oh, the goal is not to solve this. The goal is to create a problem because for whatever reason it's better for you. Yeah. Or realistically, they're so disconnected from the actual affected parties that they're actually completely oblivious to the destruction that is in the wake of those decisions. Yeah. And it's I think again it's a testament to we are a generation that was born in the Cold War, that lived through the AIDS epidemic, that saw not just 9/11 but Oklahoma City, Columbine, these mass atrocities. the war on terror, great financial crisis, and now the Obama and Trump administration. Like the Vietnam War in the 60s and then into the 70s, a very big deal. Obviously, the middle part of the 20th century, World War II, etc. But the amount of change and just catastrophic world events that have happened in the last 35 years, it's really, I believe, going to affect us the rest of our lives, because we've never really had a time where anything was steady. What was the most steady time for you and I being born in the early to mid 80s? It's very little. Maybe when we were kids, maybe the end, but we were too young to deal with that. So I think that psychology will very much affect us. And when we look back on the Muslim ban, when we look back on transgendered soldiers not being able to fight and protect the freedoms you and I hold so dearly, I think it will be not just an embarrassing time, but a testament to when you have leaders who are bought and sold by corporations and have little to do with their constituents and the everyday Americans like you and I, or not even like you and I, we're part of the 1% as lawyers, right? Mm-hmm. Like the people that we, buy coffee from and buy gas from. We will look back on this time and say, wow, what a time of disconnect, of people being so disconnected.
Yeah, I mean, the bifurcation of society, and about like 5 years ago, I really saw this happening. It's your have-not, which is most people, almost everybody, and then you're the haves. There's two aspects. Like, it's inevitable. It seems like the path we're going, and it's just getting worse every year. I mean, when you have like these billionaires who are soaking up billions and billions, and like they own everything and stuff, there's definitely something wrong with the system, and definitely they control it. And it's so dangerous. But one aspect of it was I got to make sure I'm on that side, because it's much better than being on the other side. So I was thought, okay, be a part of the 1%, but keep a rope out there to help them in, and keep that rope out there as long as possible. But that's, I think the immigration story is part because it's economic too. And I was listening to somebody talk about in the days when Martin Luther King would go in the South and try to, and really all of America, to desegregate and have all these fix all these problems. The biggest people that were against, African Americans coming and working were other poor workers who are fighting them. Now realizing they're both getting screwed in the system. It's like always pitting the people that should be uniting against each other. And this is a story as old as time.
It's capitalism at its heart, right? Don't be mad at me, the employer. Be mad at the person you're competing for. And the flip side of that is, wait, why are you and I fighting? It's the guy who's not paying us anything and telling us love it or leave it that we should really be mad at, right? Yeah, it's an interesting aspect of economics, whereas I think as a generation we will ask, why are people bankrupt in the United States and nowhere else when it comes to medical costs? Why is it in a country that is by far the most populated? Comparatively, we are very minimal of population compared to the land that the United States has, right? Why is it that life is so hard if you're not born in the right socioeconomic status, right? Why is it in a land that we're supposedly pride ourselves on opportunity, bootstraps, if you have the right work ethic, etc., but if you're born to a single parent and you're a person of color and you have potentially born with a disability, or you're born in a body that you don't subscribe to, how is that person going to be able to pull themselves up, right? There's systematic issues that will deny that person their ability to mobilize themselves.
Do you think those systematic issues don't exist in every country? If anything, U.S. is less?
I would say we do good things. We do things better than other places, but those places do things better than us, right? I think it's kind of those you pick and choose. That I think, as tough as being a person of color or being a woman or being somebody that's LGBTQ in the United States is, and as better as those things may be other places, across the board I still think it's better in the United States. Mm-hmm. But look at me. I've not experienced those things, right? I'm not any of those things. So it's easy for me to say that from reading data or looking, reading stories or talking to people. I think it's a testament, again, once the old generation dies off and the internet generation becomes in power, I just think the way we approach things is going to be so much more reflective of what reality is actually like. And we will look back on this time, again, Muslim ban and this just non-comprehensive immigration system we have, and be like, man, what were we thinking? Mm-hmm. And that's American History 101. Going enough time and looking back 30 years, I'm like, oh my God, what were we thinking?
Yeah.
And you'd think we'd get better at learning from our mistakes. But, 100 years ago, there was anti-Chinese exclusion acts. If you were Japanese, you couldn't be, a U.S. citizen if you were born here. I mean, it's a funny idea to think we are exactly where we were. We just now can, order food and, buy it.
Kind of bringing it to some news events, there was a report that came out that there's a Confucian Institute that China has in all the college campuses, and it's funded, essentially, they're saying, by the Chinese government there, and part of it is to, push their agenda, and also there's other Chinese students to watch out for them, what they're doing, if they're saying, they're Falun Gong or anti-communist or all this kind of stuff. And when these reports come out, one issue that comes out affects immigration, because there's a big F1 student population. There's a lot of Chinese people that come here, employment-based, family-based. They're going to be under scrutiny, similar to what the travel ban was. There's got to be some truth to the fact that the Chinese government is doing what it can to infiltrate the U.S. in its way, but at the same time, to stop that potential infiltration, and who knows how much effect it'll have. If we're real Americans and we believe in what we believe, that shouldn't affect us anyways, if we stick to our morals and our Constitution. But if that's there's a fear there, some effect that comes through, there might be a pushback on immigration to stop people from that group coming. What is your opinion on this kind of stuff? Like, is it one of those things where you got to bite the bullet because we're a free society, we can't... To me, that's my opinion. Is we're a free society, we have to take the good with the bad that it comes with. But are those things that worry you if Chinese government or some sort of foreign hostile nation, and China to a large extent is hostile to this ideology and stuff, is that a worry? And how do you think the immigration system should exist to handle those kind of threats? Potential threats.
It's kind of like we'll always have crime.
Yeah.
No matter if everybody has a chip in their arm and there's a police officer on every corner, crime will exist at all time, right? And so it becomes less about how can we create laws or systems that eliminates all crime. It becomes how can we create a system that disincentivizes crime and makes it so that when it happens, we deal with that at source. Mm-hmm. And so in the same way, I would say that, again, if you can't stop all of anything, life's going to happen, people are going to do what they're going to do. And so to try to restrict flow of people, I think has much more negative effects than it would be if you were just diligent about the case-by-case type of situation. Mm-hmm. And so I think I subscribe to the same ideology you do, which is, all right, we'll take it as it comes. And, a spread of ideas, if anything, strengthens who you are. If you don't continue to learn about other ideas, and you stay, oh no, if I learn about anything else, then that will, rock what I believe.
Yeah.
If you think that's the case, you and I both know it's the other way around. It's by taking on new ideas and thinking about it that it actually strengthens your position.
Yeah.
And so I think in the same way there, where in a country that prides itself on being a nation that has an open forum to debate all ideas, I think you end up doing actually their job, or this idea that if people were trying to come in and kind of sway the general public by trying to outlaw it, because now it looks now you're actually incentivized, like, oh, why is it outlawed? That's provocative, right? Yeah. Or, oh, is it outlawed because it actually, it's going to challenge us so much so? So it's kind of almost like by letting them, by being not heavy-handed and allowing the kind of, the U.S. system of laws and the free thinking society we have operate as it has, I think we'll actually see that whatever their intentions are, or this prospective intention or this idea, I don't think it'll be as successful as they think. Mm-hmm. Because again, you come to the United States or you live in the United States, you realize everybody works, everybody's trying to just be happy and do no harm to other people, and that the few or the minority that aren't doing those things and have ulterior motives, there's 1,000 to 1 to those people.
They get caught pretty quick. I think the ones that are problematic are the ones in power, that they have the most massive destructive effects.
Absolutely. It's a testament to, if you love your partner, but you're scared they're going to cheat on you, you can't lock them up and say, never leave, because then I can feel safe that you're never going to cheat on me. The idea is, no, you let them go and do their thing, and if that person cheats on you, well, then that person was never the right person. And
if anything, that fear of them cheating on you is going to push them out to cheat on you. That's what happens.
It's funny how that works, right?
Yeah, I mean, for example, this Confucius thing, if we have a system that's really good, even if they do send agents, we would flip the agents. You're like, wait, all the garbage they told me in the propaganda classes back home, it's not true. I've met Americans. It's not like this.
Look at North Korea, right? I mean, is this not what we understand it to be, a society where everybody's bred to believe a certain way in the world, and then when people defect, they realize, oh yeah. You know, there's something to be said about the human experience, and that the thirst for knowledge and trying to find truth, that has been around for as long as human society. And so that's why religion, that's why economics, that's why all these kind of just life experience are so, they bring us together more than they separate us, because we're all searching for that same kind of, what is happiness, what is it to be content, what it is to, during the small time that we're alive in this world, what is out there that can make me wake up every day and want to be, get up and get out.
Now, we've been going for a while. Let's see what time it is. It's, is it 2 hours or something?
Almost an hour.
How was your trip back? What you going to? You go to a valley, right?
No, heading east. No, my office is downtown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, keeping here.
Well, what's funny is I have a slew of calls after this.
Okay, good.
But that Friday schedule is one of those things where you try to be available, and whether it's a potential client or a current client or someone you've been chatting with, everybody's kind of on the same wavelength on a Monday afternoon. It's kind of like, I'll talk to you Monday. Maybe we push it down. But go through the email, see what we're doing, see what I'm doing next week. I'm sure the same way, where you want to make sure you're almost one step ahead of next week so you can actually enjoy the weekend. So much of our business, especially as solos, is making sure you maintain your schedule, or you control your schedule doesn't control you. And a lot of that is being like, all right, I got a busy Monday, but everything that needs to get done is done, so I will not think about it until I'm going to bed Sunday night, right? I have on Monday morning, I have a San Bernardino adjustment case. It's a 245i family based. And then I have, I think I have a few calls. I'm sure you do the same thing if you're driving all over Southern California, is you stack those calls when you're commuting. Because it's kind of two birds with one hug, if you will, not stone.
And it makes the trip so much easier. Big time.
Yeah, I'm in the asylum office for another attorney a couple days next week too, which is always fun. For those not in Los Angeles, going from LA to Anaheim is a massive travel. You have to pass Disneyland, and that's if you ever wanted to know a cruel joke that we have in Southern California, and maybe just that exists in the United States, is next to Disneyland, at least currently, because they are moving the locations, across the street is the Southern California Asylum Office. So let's say you've escaped persecution from your home country, you've gotten to the United States, your family, relatives, strangers, but you're from the same place. They're looking out for you to apply for asylum in the United States. You have to go to an interview, and that interview is, I kid you not, spitting distance from Disneyland. And so I always think about the family going to Disneyland from the Midwest, decked out at Disneyland, staying at the cheaper hotel down the street. They're walking in. They're walking next to the family, getting off the bus to go to their asylum interview because they're from Syria or Guatemala or China. And that's a very different experience. But talk about a juxtaposition of experiences, right? Busy week next week. Today, as is the case when I get to Friday, I always try to have everything tied up so that it's kind of like, okay, weekend mode. My wife has, she's going out of town for a couple weeks for work.
Couple weeks?
Yeah. My wife is just as busy as I am and works in a completely different world. And that's also funny. A lot of what I learn about professionalism and my career and keeping my office where it needs to be, a lot of it is reflecting on how other people's worlds are and realizing that to be a professional, it's very similar, regardless of trade, regardless of practice. And so that's why a lot of the truths you and I kind of have agreed upon and kind of live our life by, that's not just for solo immigration attorneys in Los Angeles. That is for anybody that needs to maintain a very difficult job with a lot of stress, never knowing all the answers, but still having to kind of proceed and being able to go to bed at night and not freak out, being able to enjoy your time off so you can kind of decompress. And I see that in my wife, where we're in very different worlds and yet we deal with the exact same things.
How much time do you think you have? I have questions galore.
Yeah, perfect. Let's go 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah,
okay, well,
that's
let's
fine.
wrap it up. Well, how do you keep up on your mastery of immigration law and information?
You know, it's one of those things where first things first, I've never realized that I know it all, even the things I do every day. So my switch is always on as far as learning. And I think that's something that you're big on as well, is you're constantly consuming information, constantly consuming stories and surveys and data and really nuanced parts of what we do, or maybe not part of what we do, but have to do about the kind of in the world we operate in. You know, you're reading an article about what's happening in Western Europe's financial market, because you're thinking, oh, okay, you know, that's likely going to affect people, that's going to affect business, that's going to affect how money moves, and you know, that could be good and or bad for business, right?
When the revolution happened in Ukraine, I saw that. The next day I started getting calls, hey, I'm from Ukraine, I want to do asylum, get the hell out of here. It's like, you really see the work you do in the news and the headlines, even before the drama of the politicization. Our jobs ripped out of the headlines. It's really interesting. You see the effects of it.
So, you know, whether it's you know, Twitter, whether it's just, you know, always having news feeds through Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, having various settings on my, you know, Gmail, Google account, and just getting like constant barrage of what's happening both locally and internationally. And then when it comes to immigration, you know, there's a plethora of publications and groups you can be a part of, and listservs of people like you and I across the country and across the world dealing with this stuff, you know, in real time. So it really is, how do I keep up? Well, one, we can never keep up, right? So I realize I'm never going to know everything.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And two, realizing that when you do what we do, it is a 24/7 job. And even if you're not bringing in money or getting clients' cases prepared or meeting with clients, you're either not learning something or not doing something, or you are doing it. And the way I live and the way my mind and my body works is I can take that constant consumption to the point where my wife always asks me, are you all right? I think you're overworking yourself. And I'm like, no, if anything, I feel joy that I get to operate in a world, in a space where it's never the same and it's always changing. And currently it's changing for the worse. And so it's kind of like, I think at this day and age, I think for those of us that are the age we are, there going to be a time when things get better.